You're too old for every man. The words hung in the air of the crowded coffee shop like poison on Christmas night. Claire Addison, 46, CEO, composed, felt her chest tighten, but she didn't move. She'd heard worse, she'd survived worse, but this man, this stranger her mother had promised was perfect, didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Across the room, Nate Cole heard it too. He saw the way Claire's shoulders went rigid, the way her fingers trembled against her coffee cup. He recognized that look, the practiced stillness of someone who'd learned to take cruelty in silence. And he decided right then he wasn't going to let her face it alone. If you're watching this story unfold, I invite you to stay until the very end, because what happens next will restore your faith in unexpected kindness. Please hit the like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The Christmas lights strung across Morrison's coffee house cast a warm amber glow that seemed almost mocking in its cheerfulness. Outside, fresh snow had begun to fall over downtown Seattle, turning the city into something from a holiday card. Inside, the cafe buzzed with the comfortable noise of people seeking refuge from both the cold and their own loneliness on a night when everyone else seemed to have somewhere better to be. Claire Addison sat in the corner booth her mother had reserved, her hands wrapped around a cup of peppermint tea that had long gone cold. She was 46, though people often guessed younger, not because she'd fought aging with surgery or desperation, but because she carried herself with the kind of careful grace that came from years of navigating rooms full of men who were waiting for her to fail. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple twist, and she wore a cream sweater that was elegant without trying too hard. She'd learned over the years that trying too hard was always a mistake. "So," the man across from her said, not looking up from his phone, "your mom says you run some kind of tech company?" His name was Derek. Derek with the expensive watch and the cologne that was just a touch too strong. Derek who had arrived 15 minutes late and hadn't apologized. Derek, who her mother had called 3 times this week to tell her, was absolutely wonderful and exactly what you need, Claire Bear. "I'm the CEO of Addison Analytics," Claire said evenly. "We develop data visualization software for—" Right. Derek's thumb was still scrolling. "That's cool. My buddy does something with apps. Makes a killing." Claire's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She'd been running her company for 12 years. She had 240 employees, contracts with Fortune 500 companies, and a platform that had revolutionized how hospitals tracked patient outcomes. But Derek's buddy made apps, so that was apparently the standard of comparison. "What do you do?" she asked, because that's what you did on dates. You asked questions. You pretended to be interested. You gave people chances to surprise you, even when you already knew they wouldn't. Investments. High-yield portfolios, mostly corporate bonds. He said it like she should be impressed. "It's pretty complex, probably wouldn't make sense if I explained it." There it was, the casual dismissal disguised as consideration. Claire had heard variations of this her entire career. "You wouldn't understand. It's technical." "Let me simplify it for you. Never mind that she had a master's degree in computer science from MIT. Never mind that she'd built her company from the ground up, learning every aspect of the business from coding to contract negotiation. Men like Derek looked at her and saw someone who needed things explained slowly, in small words, with patience they expected her to be grateful for. "I'm sure I could follow along," Claire said mildly. Derek finally looked up from his phone, and something in his expression shifted. It wasn't quite cruel, not yet. But there was an assessment happening behind his eyes that made Claire's stomach clench with familiar dread. "You know what?" he said, setting his phone down with exaggerated care. "I'm going to be honest with you, Claire. My mother pushed me into this, and I said yes because she wouldn't shut up about it. But I think we both know this isn't going anywhere." Claire felt the heat rising in her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. "I appreciate your honesty." "Do you?" Derek leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Because here's the thing, and I'm only saying this to save us both time. You're too old for every man who's going to be worth your while. The successful guys my age, they're dating women in their 30s. The younger guys, they want someone they can start a family with. You're in this weird middle ground where you're too old to be exciting, but too young to have given up, and honestly, it's kind of sad. The cafe didn't go quiet. That only happened in movies. The espresso machine kept hissing, the couple by the window kept laughing at something on a laptop screen. The barista kept calling out orders in that sing-song voice that suggested she was running on Christmas cheer and caffeine in equal measure. But for Claire, everything narrowed down to Derek's face, to the casual cruelty in his tone, to the way he was looking at her like she was a problem that had just solved itself. She should have said something cutting. She should have stood up and walked out. She should have thrown her cold tea in his face, or laughed in his smug expression, or told him exactly what she thought of men who confused net worth with actual worth. Instead, she went very still. It was a skill she'd learned young and perfected over decades. When her college boyfriend had broken up with her because his mother didn't approve of her ambition. When her ex-husband had told her 8 years ago that their marriage was over because she couldn't give him children and he needed to explore other options. When her own mother had looked at her across the Thanksgiving table last month and said, "You know, Claire, maybe if you'd tried harder to be what Marcus needed, you wouldn't be alone now." You went still. You breathed carefully. You swallowed everything that wanted to come screaming out, the rage, the hurt, the desperate question of why am I not enough? And you turned it into something hard and cold inside your chest. You survived the moment. Then you went home and survived the next one, and the one after that, until eventually you stopped thinking about what it might feel like to actually be seen, to actually be chosen, to actually be told that you were exactly right just as you were. "I see," Claire said quietly. Her hands were shaking, so she pressed them flat against the table. "Thank you for clarifying the situation." Derek was already pulling on his jacket. "Yeah, well, no hard feelings, right? Just saving us both the trouble of pretending there's potential here. You seem nice enough. I'm sure you'll find someone eventually. Maybe try one of those apps for older women?" He didn't wait for a response. He just stood up, tossed a 20 on the table like he was doing her a favor by covering his coffee, and walked out into the snowy night without looking back. Claire sat there, hands pressed to the table, breathing very carefully. She would not cry. She had not cried over Marcus, and she would not cry over Derek, and she would not cry over the fact that her mother had clearly told this stranger things about her age, her childlessness, her suitability as a project, that had led him to believe he could speak to her this way. "Excuse me." The voice was quiet, male, and coming from somewhere to her left. Claire looked up, ready to tell whoever it was that she was fine. She didn't need help. She was perfectly capable of handling one mediocre man's opinion of her worth. The man standing beside her table wasn't what she expected. He was maybe her age or a few years younger, with dark hair that was graying at the temples and eyes that were a startling shade of blue-gray. He wore jeans and a faded navy sweater that had seen better days, and he was holding a laptop bag like he'd just been working in the corner. There was something quiet about him, something careful, but also something steady that made Claire pause before delivering her automatic dismissal. "I'm sorry," he said, and he sounded like he meant it. "I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but that guy was loud enough that half the cafe probably heard. Are you okay?" It was such a simple question, asked with such genuine concern, that Claire felt something crack in her chest. "I'm fine," she said automatically. Then, because something in his expression suggested he wouldn't believe her, she added, "I will be fine." "Okay." He didn't move to leave, but he didn't sit down either. Just stood there, the stranger with kind eyes, like he was waiting to see if she needed anything else. "That was a really cruel thing he said to you. I hope you know it says everything about him and nothing about you." Claire laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Does it? Because in my experience, when enough people say the same thing, eventually it becomes true." No," the man said firmly. "It becomes a repeated lie. There's a difference." Something about the certainty in his voice made Claire look at him more closely. He had the worn-down look of someone who'd been through his own battles, the kind of tiredness that lived in the shoulders and the eyes, that came from carrying weight for so long you forgot what it felt like to set it down. "I'm Nate," he said, offering his hand. "Nate Cole. And I promise I'm not trying to hit on you or take advantage of a bad situation. I saw what happened, and I couldn't not say something." Claire shook his hand. His grip was warm, solid. "Claire Addison. And thank you, but I'm okay, really." "Okay," Nate nodded slowly. "I'll leave you alone then. But for what it's worth, That guy's an idiot. Anyone who can't see what's valuable about you isn't worth 5 minutes of your time. He turned to go, and Claire heard herself say, "Wait." Nate stopped, looked back. "Were you really working here on Christmas night?" Claire asked. "Or are you hiding from something too?" The smile that crossed Nate's face was rueful and understanding. "Little of both, if I'm honest. My daughter's with my ex-wife until tomorrow afternoon, and my apartment gets pretty quiet on holidays. Easier to be around other people, even if I'm not talking to them." "You have a daughter?" 7 years old, Emma. She's... Nate's whole face softened. "She's everything, honestly. Best thing I ever did with my life." Claire felt the familiar ache in her chest, the one that never quite went away, the one that had ended her marriage and haunted her mother's every conversation. "That's wonderful. She's lucky to have a dad who clearly loves her so much." "I'm the lucky one," Nate said simply. Then, with careful hesitation, "Can I ask you something? And you can absolutely tell me to mind my own business." "Go ahead." "Why did you stay sitting there while he said those things to you? Someone like you, successful, clearly accomplished, why didn't you just walk out?" It was a fair question, but it still made Claire's throat tight. "Because I've learned that walking out doesn't change what people think. It doesn't change what they say to the next person, or the way they move through the world, believing they have the right to assess other people's worth. And maybe part of me wondered if he was right." "He's not," Nate said immediately. "He's absolutely not right." "You don't know me," Claire said softly. "You don't know anything about my life, or my choices, or why a 46-year-old woman is sitting alone in a coffee shop on Christmas night, letting her mother set her up on blind dates with men who think she's past her expiration date." "You're right," Nate agreed. "I don't know you. But I know cruelty when I hear it, and I know the kind of person who mistakes meanness for honesty. And I know that age is just a number people use when they're too lazy or too scared to see who's actually standing in front of them." Something in Claire's chest loosened, not much, but enough that she could take a full breath for the first time since Derek had walked out. "That's a nice thought." "It's not a thought, it's true." Nate shifted his laptop bag from one shoulder to the other. "Look, I really will leave you alone if you want. But if you're not ready to go home yet, and you don't mind the company of someone who's also hiding from an empty apartment, I'd be happy to buy you a fresh cup of tea and we can talk about anything except terrible blind dates." Claire looked up at this stranger with his kind eyes and his worn sweater, and she made a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary. "I'd like that," she said. "I'd really like that." Nate Cole had not planned on this. He'd planned on spending Christmas evening doing exactly what he'd been doing when he overheard Derek's cruelty. Working through a backlog of security patches while drinking mediocre coffee and pretending the holiday lights strung around the cafe made him feel festive rather than hollow. He'd perfected this routine over the past 3 years, ever since his divorce had turned holidays into a carefully negotiated schedule of who got Emma when, and how to split the magic of Christmas morning into something that fit everyone's legal requirements. But then he'd heard that man's voice, casual, dismissive, cruel, and he'd looked up from his laptop to see a woman sitting very still, her hands pressed flat against the table like she was trying to hold herself together through sheer force of will. And Nate had recognized that look. He'd worn it himself, the morning his ex-wife had told him she was leaving. Not because he'd done anything wrong, she'd said, just because she'd realized she wanted something different. Someone different. Someone who made more money, who had bigger ambitions, who didn't come home tired from fixing other people's computer problems and want nothing more than to play with his daughter and fall asleep on the couch watching nature documentaries. "You're a good man," Sarah had told him, packing boxes in their bedroom while 7-year-old Emma ate cereal in the kitchen, oblivious. "You're just not my man anymore." 3 years later, Nate still didn't quite know what to do with that distinction. Good, but not enough. Kind, but not exciting. Safe, but not chosen. So when he'd seen Claire Addison sitting in that booth, absorbing cruelty with practiced stillness, he'd known he couldn't just sit there and watch another person be told they weren't enough. Now, as he settled into the booth across from her with 2 fresh cups of tea, Nate found himself wondering if he'd made a mistake. Not because Claire wasn't worth talking to, quite the opposite. She had the kind of quiet elegance that suggested she was used to commanding rooms, and the kind of careful control that suggested she'd learned not to let those rooms see her bleed. Nate wasn't sure he had anything to offer someone like that except his own broken pieces, and he'd learned the hard way that being kind wasn't the same as being valuable. "So," Claire said, wrapping her hands around the new cup of tea, "tell me about Emma." 7 years old, that's a great age. Nate felt himself relax slightly. Talking about Emma was easy. Emma was the one thing in his life he knew he'd gotten right. She's incredible, smart, funny, completely fearless in ways that terrify me regularly. Right now she's obsessed with space, wants to be an astronaut, or maybe a scientist who studies black holes, or possibly both at the same time. Both at the same time sounds very efficient, Claire said, and there was the ghost of a smile on her face. That's what I told her. She made me check out every book the library had on space travel, and now she quizzes me every night at dinner about the planets. I've learned more about Jupiter's moons in the past month than I did in all of high school. Sounds like she keeps you on your toes. Constantly. Nate took a sip of his tea, gathering courage. What about you? What do you do when you're not being ambushed by your mother's questionable matchmaking? Claire's expression flickered, something between amusement and resignation. I run a company, data visualization software for healthcare systems. It's consuming. Most of my days are spent in meetings, putting out fires, trying to keep 240 people employed and productive. That's impressive, Nate said, and meant it. I'm in IT. I lead a small team at a mid-sized firm. Nothing on that scale, but I know how complicated it gets, even managing 5 people. I can't imagine doing it with hundreds. It has its challenges. Claire's fingers traced the rim of her cup. Though sometimes I think the job is easier than the rest of it. At work, people need things from me. They need decisions, direction, solutions. There's clarity in that. Outside of work, she trailed off, shaking her head. Sorry, that probably sounds pathetic. It sounds honest, Nate said quietly. And I get it. When Emma's with me, I have purpose, structure. I'm dad, and that role makes sense. When she's with Sarah, I'm just a guy in an apartment trying to figure out what to do with himself. Claire looked at him with something that might have been recognition. Your ex-wife, Sarah? How long have you been divorced? 3 years. It was... Nate paused, choosing his words carefully. It was amicable, I guess. No screaming, no fighting. She just woke up one day and realized she didn't want the life we'd built. Said she needed something different, someone different. I'm sorry. It's okay. I mean, it's not, but it is. She's actually engaged now. Guy she works with owns his own consulting firm. Emma likes him, which is what matters. Nate heard the slight edge in his own voice and tried to soften it. Sorry, it's fine. Really. You don't have to convince me it's fine, Claire said gently. My marriage ended 8 years ago, and I'm still not sure I've convinced myself. What happened? If you don't mind me asking. Claire was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her tea. When she spoke, her voice was careful, practiced, like she'd told this story before and learned exactly which words to use to get through it. Marcus wanted children. I couldn't have them. We tried for years, specialists, procedures, everything. And when it became clear it wasn't going to happen, he decided he needed to explore other options. He's married now, has 2 kids with his new wife. They send Christmas cards. Jesus, Nate breathed. I'm sorry. It's fine, Claire said quickly. Then, with a bitter laugh, sorry, I just did what you did. Pretended it's fine when it's not. How long does it take, Nate asked, before it actually is fine? I don't know. I'll tell you when I get there. Claire lifted her eyes to meet his. My mother thinks the solution is to just find someone new, hence tonight's disaster. She's convinced that if I just tried harder, smiled more, was more accommodating, some wonderful man would sweep in and fix everything that's broken about my life. There's nothing broken about your life, Nate said firmly. Isn't there? Claire's voice was soft, almost wondering. I'm 46, Nate. No husband, no children, no prospects. I work 80 hours a week because going home to an empty house feels like failure. My mother looks at me like I'm a problem she can't solve. And men like Derek look at me like I'm already past relevance. She stopped, seeming surprised by her own honesty. Sorry, you asked me to coffee, not therapy. I asked you to tea, Nate corrected gently. And you can tell me anything you want, or nothing at all. But for what it's worth, nothing you just described sounds like failure to me. It sounds like a life that's different from what you expected, which isn't the same thing as broken. Claire studied him for a long moment. You're very kind. Is that what got you through your divorce? Just being relentlessly kind to yourself? Nate laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of him. God, no. I'm terrible to myself. I spent the first year convinced it was my fault, that if I'd been more ambitious, made more money, been more exciting, Sarah wouldn't have left. The second year, I was just angry. And this past year, I've been trying to figure out who I am when I'm not someone's husband or just Emma's dad. And? Have you figured it out? Not even close, Nate admitted, but I'm learning that maybe that's okay. Maybe none of us are supposed to have it all figured out. We just do the best we can with what we have, and we try to be kind to other people and eventually to ourselves. That sounds very wise. It sounds very much like something my therapist says to me every week, Nate said ruefully. I'm working on believing it. They talked for another hour, easy conversation that surprised them both with its comfort. Claire told him about building her company from nothing, about the satisfaction of solving impossible problems and the loneliness of being the one everyone looked to for answers. Nate told her about raising Emma alone, about the terror of being responsible for another human being and the joy of watching her become exactly who she was meant to be. They didn't talk about Derek or Sarah or Marcus or any of the people who had looked at them and decided they weren't enough. They talked about space and data and the strange magic of snow on Christmas night. They talked about books and coffee and whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Claire said absolutely. Nate was scandalized. They talked like two people who'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen as whole, who were remembering in real time that maybe they still were. When the barista announced last call, they both looked surprised. I should go, Claire said, but she didn't move. Yeah, Nate agreed, not moving either. Outside, through the wide front windows, the snow was still falling. The street was nearly empty now, just the occasional car crawling past through the white. Can I walk you to your car? Nate asked, just to make sure you get there okay. That would be nice, Claire said softly. They pulled on their coats in silence, gathering their things. When they stepped outside, the cold hit them like a shock, clean and sharp, turning their breath to clouds. Claire's car was parked 3 blocks away, and they walked slowly, neither of them eager to end this unexpected evening. Thank you, Claire said as they reached her car, a sensible hybrid that somehow seemed exactly right for her. For all of this. For saying something when Derek was awful, for staying, for listening. Thank you for letting me, Nate said. Then, before he could second-guess himself, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you say yes to tonight? To the blind date? Claire was quiet, her breath making small clouds in the frozen air. Because my mother is relentless, and it was easier than saying no. And because some part of me still hoped that maybe she was right, that maybe there was someone out there who would look at me and see something worth choosing. She shook her head. Stupid, right? No, Nate said. Human. They stood there in the snow, two people who'd been broken by different hands but in similar ways, who'd learned to survive by going very still, by swallowing hurt, by convincing themselves that being alone was easier than hoping for something better. I don't want to do this, Claire said suddenly. Do what? Say goodbye and go home and pretend this was just a nice conversation with a stranger. I don't want to go back to my empty house and my mother's phone calls and men who look at me like I'm past my expiration date. Her voice was shaking now. I'm tired, Nate. I'm so tired of being told I'm too old, too broken, too late. I'm tired of believing them. Nate felt something crack open in his chest. Recognition, or courage, or maybe just the desperate need to tell someone else the truth he'd been hiding from himself. I'm tired too, he said quietly. I'm tired of being the good guy who wasn't good enough. I'm tired of going home to silence and wondering if I'm ever going to be anything more than just someone's almost. I'm tired of being kind to everyone except myself. Claire looked up at him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. What do we do about it? Nate didn't have an answer. He'd spent 3 years learning how to survive loneliness, not how to escape it. But standing there in the snow with this woman who understood, who'd been hurt by different people, but in the same fundamental way, he felt something shift, something small but significant, like the first crack in ice before the thaw. Maybe we start small, he said. Maybe we just don't say goodbye yet. Maybe we have coffee again, or tea, or whatever. Maybe we just see what it feels like to be around someone who doesn't need us to be anything except exactly who we are. That sounds terrifying, Claire whispered. Yeah, Nate agreed. It really does. They stood there in the falling snow, both of them scared of hoping again, both of them too tired not to try. One day at a time? Claire asked finally. One day at a time, Nate confirmed. Claire nodded slowly, then reached out and squeezed his hand, brief, warm, real. Good night, Nate. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Claire. She got in her car and he watched her pull away, her taillights disappearing into the white. He should have gone home then. Should have gone back to his apartment and his silence and his carefully structured life. Instead, Nate turned and walked back up the snowy street, past the now dark coffee shop, until he found what he was looking for. A small flower shop, still lit up, the owner just starting to close. Nate knocked on the glass door. The owner, an older woman with kind eyes, looked up, saw him standing there in the snow, and smiled like she understood exactly what he needed. 5 minutes later, Nate was back in his car with a single white rose wrapped in simple paper, already texting Claire. Don't go to sleep yet. I have something for you. Her response came quickly. I'm still in my driveway, too scared to go inside to the silence. Stay there, Nate typed. 5 minutes. He drove through the snowy streets carefully, his heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. This was insane. He barely knew this woman. She was a CEO, successful and accomplished, and he was just an IT guy with a modest apartment and a daughter who was his whole world. What did he possibly have to offer someone like Claire Addison? But then he remembered the look on her face when Derek had walked away, the practiced stillness, the swallowed hurt. And he remembered his own reflection in the bathroom mirror on the nights Emma wasn't there. The same exhaustion, the same quiet desperation, the same terrible certainty that he'd somehow missed his chance at being chosen. Maybe kindness was enough. Maybe showing up was enough. Maybe sometimes the bravest thing you could do was hand someone a single flower and tell them, without words, that they were worth seeing. Claire's house was a small craftsman in a quiet neighborhood, lights glowing warm through the windows. Her car was in the driveway, and she was sitting behind the wheel, staring straight ahead like she was gathering courage. Nate parked behind her and got out, the white rose in his hand. Claire saw him through her rearview mirror and stepped out of her car, confusion and something that might have been hope crossing her face. Nate? What are you? I couldn't let you go home without this, Nate said, holding out the rose. His hand was shaking slightly, but his voice was steady. You said you're tired of being told you're too old, too broken, too late. I wanted you to have something that says the opposite. Something that says you're exactly right, exactly enough, exactly on time. On. Claire took the rose, staring down at it like she couldn't quite believe it was real. When she looked up, tears were streaming down her face. Why did you do this? Because you deserve it, Nate said simply. Because everyone deserves to be reminded that they're valued. And because, he paused, gathering courage. Because I needed to remind myself that it's okay to try, to hope, to believe that maybe we're not too late after all. Claire laughed through her tears, a sound that was half sob, half wonder. This is the nicest thing anyone has done for me in years. Then people have been failing you, Nate said quietly, and I'm sorry for that. They stood there in the snow, in the glow of her porch light, two broken people holding onto a single white rose, and the fragile possibility that maybe, just maybe, they could help each other remember what it felt like to hope. Thank you, Claire whispered, for seeing me, for staying, for this. Thank you for letting me, Nate said. Then because the moment called for it, one day at a time. One day at a time, Claire agreed. She held the rose carefully as she walked to her door, and Nate waited until she was inside, until the door closed behind her, before he got back in his car. As he drove home through the snow, his phone buzzed with a message. I'm putting it in a vase where I'll see it every morning. Thank you for reminding me that I'm allowed to hope. I'm glad you were there tonight. Sleep well, Nate. Nate pulled over, his hand shaking, and typed back, I'm glad I was there too. Sweet dreams, Claire. That night, Claire Addison fell asleep in her quiet house with a white rose on her bedside table, and something she'd thought she'd lost for good, settling warm in her chest. Hope that maybe she wasn't too old, too broken, too late. Hope that maybe kindness still existed in the world. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd been seen by exactly the right person at exactly the right time. And 3 miles away, Nate Cole fell asleep in his quiet apartment with his phone on his chest, already looking forward to tomorrow in a way he hadn't in 3 years. Neither of them knew what would happen next. Neither of them had promises or guarantees or any certainty beyond this moment. But for the first time in longer than either could remember, they had hope. And sometimes, on a snowy Christmas night when the world feels cold and cruel, hope is enough to keep you warm until morning. The morning came too bright, sunlight streaming through Claire's bedroom window and hitting the white rose on her nightstand with an almost aggressive cheerfulness. She'd woken 3 times during the night to check that it was still there, that the entire evening hadn't been some elaborate dream constructed by her lonely brain. But the rose was real, the vase was real, and when she checked her phone, Nate's messages were still there, solid proof that someone had seen her breaking and had decided to care. Claire sat up slowly, her body stiff from a night of fitful sleep. It was December 26th, the day after Christmas, and she had exactly 4 hours before her mother would call, expecting a detailed report on how the date with Derek had gone. The thought made her stomach clench. Her phone buzzed. For one wild moment, Claire hoped it was Nate, but the name on the screen was exactly who she'd been dreading. Hi, Mom. Claire Bear. Her mother's voice was bright with forced enthusiasm. I've been dying to hear how last night went. Derek seemed like such a catch when I met him at the country club. Tell me everything. Claire looked at the white rose, gathering courage from its simple presence. It didn't go well, Mom. Derek he wasn't kind. We're not going to see each other again. There was a pause on the other end, and Claire could practically hear her mother recalibrating. What do you mean he wasn't kind? What happened? He told me I was too old for any man worth having, Claire said quietly. And then he left. Oh, honey. But her mother's tone wasn't sympathetic. It was exasperated, like Claire had somehow failed a test. What did you say to him? You didn't bring up work right away, did you? Men don't like women who talk about their careers on first dates. It's intimidating. Claire felt something hot and sharp rise in her throat. Mom, he didn't leave because I talked about work. He left because he's cruel and small, and he decided before he even sat down that I wasn't worth his time. Well, you have to admit, Claire, you're not getting any younger. Maybe if you'd been a little more... Stop. The word came out harder than Claire had intended. Just stop. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not listening to you tell me that I'm the problem, that if I just tried harder or smiled more or made myself smaller, men would want me. I'm done. Claire Addison, I am your mother, and I'm trying to help you. Do you want to end up alone? Because that's where you're headed if you don't start being realistic about your options. Maybe I'd rather be alone than be with someone who makes me feel like I need to apologize for existing, Claire said, her voice shaking. And maybe you need to accept that I'm happy with my life, even if it doesn't look like what you wanted for me. She hung up before her mother could respond, her hands trembling so hard she nearly dropped the phone. She'd never done that before, never ended a conversation with her mother without smoothing everything over, without absorbing the criticism and promising to try harder next time. Her phone rang immediately. Claire turned it off. Then she picked up the white rose, held it close, and let herself cry. Not the practiced silent tears she'd learned to shed in private, but real sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for the marriage that had ended because she couldn't give Marcus what he wanted. She cried for the years she'd spent trying to be enough for people who would never see her as anything but a problem to solve. She cried for the girl she'd been who had believed that if she just worked hard enough, achieved enough, proved herself enough, love would follow naturally. And then, when the tears finally stopped, Claire did something she hadn't done in 8 years. She called her therapist's emergency line and asked for an appointment. 3 miles away, Nate was making Emma's favorite pancakes, chocolate chip, shaped like stars, when his daughter came padding into the kitchen in her astronaut pajamas, her dark hair a wild tangle around her face. "Daddy!" Emma launched herself at him, and Nate caught her easily, breathing in the sweet scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Did you have a good Christmas at Mommy's house?" "It was okay," Emma said, wiggling down and climbing onto her stool at the counter. "Brian got me a telescope, a real one. He said we could set it up on his deck and look at Jupiter." Nate felt the familiar twist in his gut, jealousy mixed with gratitude, resentment mixed with relief. Brian could afford telescopes. Brian had a deck. Brian was the kind of man Sarah had decided she needed, and Nate was trying very hard to be okay with that for Emma's sake. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," he said, flipping a pancake. "You'll have to tell me everything you see." "Brian says I'm smart enough to be a real scientist," Emma continued, swinging her legs. "He says if I keep studying hard, I could work at NASA someday." "Brian's right, you're brilliant." Emma studied him with the unnerving perception that 7-year-olds sometimes possessed. "Are you sad, Daddy?" "No, baby, just tired. Pancakes are almost ready." But Emma wasn't fooled. She reached across the counter and patted his hand with her small one. "It's okay to be sad sometimes. You tell me that when I miss you at Mommy's house." Nate felt his throat tighten. "You're right. Thank you for reminding me." They ate pancakes together, Emma chattering about her telescope and the book about black holes that Brian had also given her, and Nate tried to focus on how lucky he was to have this bright, beautiful girl in his life, instead of on how much it hurt to share her with a man who could give her things he couldn't. After breakfast, while Emma was absorbed in building a blanket fort in the living room, Nate found himself staring at his phone. He'd checked it 17 times since waking up, hoping for a message from Claire. Nothing. Maybe she'd woken up and realized that accepting a flower from a stranger was impulsive and weird. Maybe she'd decided that whatever had passed between them last night was just holiday loneliness and nothing more. His phone buzzed. Emma's name flashed on the screen, but not his Emma. Sarah. "Hey," he answered. "Hi, Nate. Do you have a minute?" There was something in her tone that made him wary. "Sure, what's up?" "Brian and I have been talking and we wanted to run something by you. He's been offered a position in Denver. It's a huge opportunity for him, and we're thinking of taking it." Nate's world tilted. Denver. As in Colorado, Denver. As in 800 miles away, Denver. "I know it's far, but we'd work out a schedule. Longer visits, holidays, summers with you. We'd make it work." "Sarah." Nate's voice was very calm, very controlled. "You want to move our daughter 800 miles away so your fiancé can take a job. It's not just about the job. It's about our future as a family. Brian wants to marry me, Nate. He wants us to build a life together." "And what about Emma's life here, her school, her friends, her father?" "You'd still see her, just differently. And think about the opportunities for her there. Better schools, more resources, the mountains." "No." The word came out harder than Nate intended. "Absolutely not. I'm not agreeing to this." "Nate, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. You left me, Sarah. You decided you wanted something different, someone different, and I accepted that. I've been nothing but cooperative about custody and holidays and your engagement, but I'm not letting you take my daughter to another state because it's convenient for Brian's career. This isn't about convenience. It's about what's best for all of us. What's best for Emma is having both her parents actively in her life. Not seeing her father a few times a year when the custody schedule allows it." Sarah was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was tight. "I was hoping we could discuss this like adults." "We are discussing it like adults, and my answer is no. If you want to move to Denver, that's your choice. But Emma stays here." "You can't just decide that unilaterally. Watch me. I'll fight you on this, Sarah. I'll get a lawyer if I have to. But I'm not losing my daughter because you've decided to start a new life." He hung up, his hands shaking with fury and fear. Emma was still building her fort, singing softly to herself, completely unaware that her mother wanted to take her away. Nate sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Claire. "Good morning. I hope you slept well. I've been looking at the rose all morning and trying to figure out how to thank you properly. Words seem insufficient. Nate stared at the message, something in his chest loosening slightly. He typed back, "No thanks needed." "How are you doing today?" The response came quickly. "Honestly, I just hung up on my mother for the first time in my life, turned off my phone, and cried for an hour. Now I'm sitting on my couch wondering if I'm having a breakdown or a breakthrough." "Probably both," Nate wrote. "Want company?" "I have Emma today, but if you don't mind a 7-year-old who will definitely ask you about space, we could bring lunch." There was a longer pause this time. Nate started to worry he'd overstepped, pushed too hard, assumed too much. Then, "I would love that, but only if you're sure. I'm not really fit for company right now." "Neither am I," Nate admitted. "Just got off the phone with my ex-wife. She wants to move to Denver and take Emma with her." "Oh, Nate, I'm so sorry." "Yeah, so we can be not fit for company together." "What do you say?" "I say yes. Come whenever you're ready." Nate looked up to find Emma watching him from her fort, her expression curious. "Daddy? Who are you texting? You're smiling." "A friend," Nate said. "How would you feel about going to visit her today? She has a really nice house, and I bet she'd love to hear about your telescope." "Does she like space?" "I don't know, but I bet she'd love to learn about it from you." Emma considered this seriously. "Okay, but we should bring cookies. Grandma says you always bring cookies when you visit someone new." "Your grandma is very smart. Let's make cookies." They spent the next hour in the kitchen, Emma standing on a stool to help measure flour and chocolate chips, chattering about the differences between terrestrial and Jovian planets, while Nate tried not to think about custody lawyers and 800-mile distances. When the cookies were cooling on the counter, Emma announced that she needed to change into her meeting new people dress, a purple thing with stars on it that she'd insisted on buying with her birthday money. By the time they pulled up to Claire's house, Nate's anxiety was back in full force. What was he doing, bringing his daughter to meet a woman he'd known for less than 24 hours? What if Emma said something embarrassing? What if Claire took one look at his life, single dad, custody battles, modest means, and decided he was too complicated to bother with? But then Claire opened the door, and all of Nate's anxiety evaporated. She looked different in daylight, softer somehow, more real. She'd pulled her hair back in a loose ponytail, and she was wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater. Her eyes were red-rimmed, like she really had been crying, but she was smiling as she looked down at Emma. "Hi," Claire said. "You must be Emma. Your dad's told me you're going to be an astronaut." Emma looked up at her with serious consideration. "Maybe. Or a scientist. I haven't decided yet. I'm 7, so I have time." "That's very wise," Claire said gravely. "I didn't know what I wanted to do until I was much older than 7. What do you do now?" "I run a company that helps hospitals keep track of important information. It's not as exciting as space, but it helps people." Emma nodded, apparently satisfied. "We brought cookies. Daddy and I made them. They're chocolate chip." "My favorite," Claire said, stepping back to let them in. "Come in, please." Her home was warm and comfortable. Not the sterile showplace Nate had half expected, but lived in and personal. Books everywhere, comfortable furniture, framed photos of places she'd traveled. On the kitchen counter in Pride of Place sat the white rose in its simple vase. Emma spotted it immediately. "That's pretty. Did someone give you flowers?" "Your dad did," Claire said softly, meeting Nate's eyes. "Last night." "That's because Daddy's nice," Emma announced. "He gives me flowers sometimes too. Daisies are my favorite." "Daisies are excellent flowers," Claire agreed. "Would you like some lunch? I have sandwich stuff, or I could order pizza if you'd prefer." "Pizza," Emma said immediately, then looked at her father. "Is that okay, Daddy?" "Pizza sounds perfect," Nate said. While they waited for the delivery, Emma gave Claire an enthusiastic lecture on the Jupiter system, complete with drawings on Claire's notepad showing the orbits of the Galilean moons. Claire listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made Emma light up with the joy of sharing something she loved. Nate watched them together, this woman he barely knew and his daughter who was everything to him, and felt something shift in his chest. Claire wasn't performing interest or tolerating Emma's presence. She was actually engaged, actually curious, actually seeing his daughter as a complete person rather than an accessory to him. When the pizza arrived, they sat around Claire's dining table, and somehow the conversation shifted to Claire's work. Emma wanted to know how computers could help hospitals, and Claire explained data visualization in terms a 7-year-old could understand, how turning numbers into pictures could help doctors see patterns and help sick people get better faster. That's like science, Emma said, impressed, just with computers instead of telescopes. Exactly like science, Claire agreed. Same principle. Observe, analyze, find patterns, help people understand what they're seeing. Are you good at your job? Emma, Nate said warningly, but Claire just laughed. I hope so. I work very hard at it. Daddy works hard too, Emma said loyally. He fixes computers when they break. One time, he stayed up all night to fix a really important server. He said it was like doing surgery on a robot brain. That sounds like very important work, Claire said, smiling at Nate. After lunch, Emma announced that she needed to read her new Black Holes book, and she settled onto Claire's couch with the serious concentration of someone on a research mission. That left Nate and Claire in the kitchen, cleaning up pizza boxes and trying to navigate the strange intimacy of last night versus the practical reality of today. She's wonderful, Claire said quietly. You've done an amazing job with her. Thank you. She's pretty great. Nate hesitated. I'm sorry for bringing her without more warning. Don't apologize. I'm glad you're both here. Claire leaned against the counter, her arms wrapped around herself. I meant what I texted. Today's been hard. Having you here helps. Want to talk about it? Claire glanced toward the living room where Emma was absorbed in her book. Maybe later? When little ears aren't around? Fair enough. Nate stepped closer, lowering his voice. The thing with Sarah, my ex, it's not going to be simple. If she pushes this Denver thing, it could get ugly. Lawyers, court, all of it. I don't want to drag you into complicated when we're just whatever we are. What if I want to be dragged? Claire asked softly. What if complicated doesn't scare me? It should. I'm a mess, Claire. Single dad, custody battles, an apartment I can barely afford, an ex-wife who's marrying a guy who can give Emma everything I can't. You're successful, accomplished, together. You could have anyone. Except I can't, Claire said, and there was an edge to her voice now. Didn't you hear what Derek said last night? I'm too old for anyone worth having, and my mother agrees with him. She thinks I'm the problem, that if I just tried harder to be less ambitious, less successful, less myself, someone might finally want me. That's not... I hung up on her this morning. My mother. I've never done that before. I've always just absorbed it, apologized, promised to do better. But today I told her I was done listening to her tell me I'm not enough. Claire's voice was shaking. And now I'm terrified, Nate, because if I stop trying to be what everyone else wants, what if I discover that this is all there is? What if I really am just a 46-year-old woman with a successful career and an empty house and no prospects? Nate set down the dish towel he'd been holding and crossed the distance between them. He took Claire's hands in his, holding her gaze. Then you're a 46-year-old woman who built something extraordinary from nothing, who leads hundreds of people, who has the courage to hang up on someone who won't see her worth. That's not nothing, Claire. That's everything. It doesn't feel like everything, she whispered. It feels like I traded all the things I was supposed to want for things that don't keep me warm at night. Maybe the supposed to is the problem. Maybe we've both been so busy trying to be what other people needed that we forgot to ask what we needed. Claire looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. What do you need, Nate? The question hung between them, enormous and terrifying. Nate thought about Sarah telling him he was good, but not enough. He thought about Brian with his telescope and his deck and his job offer in Denver. He thought about all the nights he'd spent alone in his apartment, convincing himself that being kind was sufficient, that being a good father was enough, that wanting more was selfish. I need, Nate said slowly, to believe that being myself is worth something, that I don't have to be richer or more ambitious or more exciting to deserve to be chosen. I need to stop apologizing for being exactly who I am. Then stop, Claire said fiercely. Stop apologizing. Stop making yourself smaller. You showed up for a stranger last night because it was the right thing to do. You're raising a brilliant, kind daughter on your own. You work hard at a job that matters. You bought me a flower because you wanted me to feel valued. That's not nothing, Nate. That's everything." They stood there in her kitchen, hands clasped, both of them trembling with the weight of being seen. From the living room, Emma called out a question about event horizons, and the spell broke gently. "I should probably answer that," Nate said. "Probably," Claire agreed, but neither of them moved. Finally, Nate squeezed her hands once and stepped back. "One day at a time, right?" "One day at a time," Claire confirmed. They spent the rest of the afternoon in Claire's living room, Emma reading passages from her book and asking increasingly complex questions that had both adults scrambling to remember high school physics. When the winter sun started to sink low, painting the room in shades of gold and amber, Emma announced she was hungry again. "We should probably go," Nate said reluctantly. "Let you have your evening back. Or," Claire said carefully, "you could stay for dinner. If you want. I make a pretty good pasta." Emma's eyes lit up. "Can we, Daddy? Please?" Nate looked at Claire, saw the hope and fear in her expression that probably mirrored his own. They were moving fast. Too fast, probably. But maybe fast was okay when you'd both spent years moving nowhere at all. "We'd love to stay," he said. Dinner was chaotic and wonderful. Emma helped Claire cook, standing on a stool to stir the sauce and asking questions about everything from why onions made you cry to whether Claire had ever been to Italy. They ate at her dining table, Emma between them, chattering about her plans to visit the International Space Station someday and maybe bring her dad with her if he wasn't too scared. "I'll be terrified," Nate admitted, "but I'll go anyway because I'm not missing that." "What about you, Claire?" Emma asked. "Would you go to space?" Claire considered seriously. "I think I would. It would be scary, but some things are worth being scared for." She met Nate's eyes across the table, and he knew they weren't just talking about space anymore. After dinner, Emma crashed hard, falling asleep on Claire's couch with her head on Nate's lap. Claire brought a blanket to cover her, and then she and Nate sat in the quiet kitchen, speaking in whispers so they wouldn't wake her. "Thank you for today," Claire said. "I didn't realize how much I needed company until you were here. Thank you for letting us invade your space. I know we're a lot. You're not too much. You're just right." Claire paused. "Can I ask you something about Sarah and Denver?" "Yeah." "What are you going to do?" Nate was quiet for a long moment, staring down at his coffee. "Fight. I'll get a lawyer, file for modification of the custody agreement. Do whatever I have to do to keep Emma here. Sarah made her choice when she left. She doesn't get to make this choice too. That's going to be expensive and hard." "I know, but Emma's worth it. She's worth everything." "You're a good father," Claire said softly. "I'm trying. Some days that feels like enough. Other days—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Other days you wonder if being good is the same as being sufficient," Claire finished. "If trying hard is the same as succeeding. If loving someone completely is enough when you can't give them everything they need." "Yeah," Nate breathed. "Exactly that." They sat in silence for a while. Two people who'd learned the hard way that love wasn't always enough, that trying didn't always result in success, that being good didn't guarantee being chosen. "I called my therapist this morning," Claire said finally. "Asked for an emergency appointment. I haven't been in 2 years, kept telling myself I was fine, that I dealt with the divorce and moved on. But I haven't, have I? I've just been surviving. There's a difference." "What did your therapist say?" "That hanging up on my mother was probably the healthiest thing I've done in years. That setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's necessary. That I've spent so long trying to be palatable to people who will never be satisfied that I've forgotten how to advocate for myself." Claire's voice cracked. "She asked me what I wanted and I couldn't answer. Not about work or success or achievement, about my life, what I actually wanted from my life." "What did you tell her?" "That I don't know. That I've been so focused on proving I'm enough despite my age, despite not having children, despite being alone, that I stopped asking what enough even means to me." Claire looked at him, her eyes swimming. "What do you want, Nate? Not for Emma, not from your job. What do you want for yourself?" Nate thought about all the careful answers he'd practiced over 3 years of therapy. He thought about the way he'd learned to redirect conversations away from his own needs, to frame everything in terms of being a good father, a reliable employee, a helpful friend. He thought about Sarah asking him what he wanted and him having no answer except whatever makes you happy. "I want to matter," he said finally, "not just as Emma's dad or as the IT guy who fixes things. I want someone to choose me because of who I am, not despite it. I want to stop feeling like I have to earn the right to take up space in someone's life." "Oh, you matter," Claire said fiercely. "You matter to Emma, and you matter to me. You've known me for 24 hours. And in those 24 hours, you've shown me more kindness than most people show in years. You saw me hurting, and you did something about it. You brought your daughter to meet me because you thought I needed company. You're here, now, at 9 o'clock on the day after Christmas, when you could be home putting Emma to bed in her own room. You matter, Nate. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Nate felt something break open in his chest, something that had been locked tight since Sarah had told him he was good, but not enough. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "How to let someone in again. How to hope without protecting myself from the inevitable disappointment." "Me neither," Claire said. "But maybe we figure it out together, one day at a time, remember?" From the living room came a sleepy voice. "Daddy?" Nate stood quickly, moving to the couch where Emma was sitting up, rubbing her eyes. "Hey, sweetheart. Sorry, did we wake you?" "No, I had a dream about black holes." Emma yawned hugely. "Are we going home soon?" "Yeah, baby, let's get your shoes on." While Nate helped Emma into her coat, Claire packed up the leftover cookies in a container. At the door, Emma surprised them both by hugging Claire tightly. "Thank you for letting us visit. You're really nice. Can we come back?" Claire crouched down to Emma's level, her expression soft. "I would love that. Anytime you want?" "Good. Because I have more questions about how computers help hospitals, and Daddy doesn't know the answers." "Daddy knows some answers," Nate protested. "Not the good ones," Emma said, matter-of-factly, making both adults laugh. At the car, after Emma was buckled in and already drifting back to sleep, Nate turned to Claire. They stood close in the cold night air, their breath making clouds between them. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for today, for Emma, for all of it. Thank you for coming, for trusting me with her." Claire paused. "I know things are complicated right now, with Sarah and the move and everything. If you need space to deal with that—" "I don't want space," Nate interrupted. "I've had 3 years of space. What I want is this, whatever this is, if you're willing." "I'm willing," Claire said. "Scared, but willing." "Me too." They stood there for another moment, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Finally, Claire reached up and touched his cheek gently. "Drive safe. Text me when you're home." "I will." Nate drove through the quiet streets with Emma sleeping in the back seat, his mind full of everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. He'd gone to a coffee shop to hide from his loneliness and had found a woman who understood it. He'd bought a flower on impulse and had been thanked with tears and hope. He'd brought his daughter to meet someone new and had watched them connect like they'd known each other for years. And somewhere in the middle of all that, he'd started to believe just a little, just enough, that maybe he wasn't too late after all. That maybe being good was enough. That maybe someone could choose him exactly as he was and not ask him to be anything different. When he got home, Emma barely woke up long enough for him to get her into pajamas and tucked into bed. He kissed her forehead, breathed in the sweet smell of her hair, and whispered a promise into the darkness that he would fight for her, that he would keep her here, that she would always know she was wanted. Then he went to his own room, pulled out his phone, and texted Claire. "Home safe. Emma's asleep. I can't stop thinking about today." Her response came quickly. "Me neither. Best day I've had in a very long time. Same. Sleep well, Claire." "You too, Nate. Sweet dreams." Nate fell asleep with his phone on his chest, a smile on his face, and something dangerous blooming in his chest. The fragile, terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd found someone who saw him as enough. And in her own house, Claire fell asleep looking at the white rose on her nightstand, thinking about a 7-year-old girl who wanted to study black holes and a quiet man who had shown her more kindness in 2 days than most people showed in a lifetime. Neither of them knew what tomorrow would bring. Neither of them had promises or guarantees beyond this moment, this hope, this fragile beginning. But for now, tonight, it was enough. The lawyer's office smelled like old wood and expensive coffee, and Nate felt completely out of place. He sat in a leather chair that probably cost more than his monthly rent, across from a woman named Patricia Chen, who had kind eyes and a reputation for winning custody cases that seemed unwinnable. Sarah had insisted on mediation first, but when that had fallen apart after 2 sessions of her refusing to budge on Denver, Nate had done what he said he would. He'd hired a lawyer. "Mr. Cole," Patricia said, her fingers steepled on the polished desk between them, "I've reviewed your case, and I want to be honest with you about what we're facing. Your ex-wife has several advantages. She's remarried to someone with significant financial resources. She can offer Emma private school, a larger home, more opportunities. The courts tend to favor stability, and on paper she can provide more of it." "But Emma's stable here," Nate said, trying to keep the desperation out of his voice. "She has her school, her friends, her routine. I'm her father. That has to count for something." "It does. It absolutely does. But we need to build a case that shows keeping Emma in Seattle is in her best interest, not just yours. Tell me about your relationship with her. Be specific." So Nate talked. He talked about bedtime stories and homework help, about teaching Emma to ride a bike and staying up all night when she had the flu. He talked about their Saturday morning pancake tradition and their nightly conversations about space. He talked about how she called him first when she was scared or excited or confused, how she drew pictures of the two of them exploring Mars together, how she'd told him once that he was her favorite person in the whole universe. Patricia listened carefully, taking notes. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "That's good. That's very good. But I need to ask you something difficult. Can you afford this fight? Legal fees and custody battles can run into the tens of thousands. I know you work in IT, and I don't mean any disrespect, but I'll figure it out," Nate said firmly. "I'll take a second job if I have to. Sell my car. Whatever it takes." "Mr. Cole, I'm not trying to discourage you. I'm trying to make sure you understand what you're committing to." "I understand. Emma is worth it. She's worth everything." Patricia nodded slowly. "All right. Then here's what we're going to do. We'll file a motion to prevent relocation. We'll gather character witnesses, document your involvement in Emma's life, show that the move would be detrimental to her well-being. But I need you to understand this is going to get difficult. Sarah's lawyer will look for any weakness in your case, your work schedule, your living situation, your financial stability. They'll use whatever they can to argue that Emma would be better off with her mother. "Let them look," Nate said. "I have nothing to hide." After the meeting, Nate sat in his car in the parking garage, his hand shaking on the steering wheel. The retainer alone had been $5,000. Money he'd pulled from his emergency savings, the fund he'd been building for Emma's college education. He'd have to pick up overtime shifts, maybe look for freelance work on the weekends when Emma was with Sarah. The thought of working even more, of having less time with his daughter when he was already fighting not to lose her, made him want to put his head down on the steering wheel and just brake. Instead, he pulled out his phone and called the one person who'd made him feel less alone in the past 3 days. "Nate?" Claire's voice was warm, concerned. "How did it go?" "About as well as expected. My lawyer thinks we have a case, but it's going to be expensive and ugly, and there's no guarantee we'll win." He took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't be dumping this on you." "Yes, you should. That's what friends do." "Where are you right now?" "Parking garage, downtown." "Can you come to my office? It's only a few blocks from there. I'm between meetings, and I think you could use some company." 20 minutes later, Nate was sitting in Claire's corner office on the 14th floor of a building that probably had its own zip code. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city and the sound beyond, and the space was exactly what he'd expected: elegant, professional, impressive. What he hadn't expected were the framed photos on her desk, one of her with an older woman who must be her mother, both smiling but with a tension around their eyes that spoke of complicated history, and another of Claire herself, younger, standing in front of a building with a sign that read, "Addison Analytics, Grand Opening." "That was 12 years ago," Claire said, following his gaze. "I was 34, terrified, and convinced I was going to fail spectacularly." "But you didn't." "No, Though some days I still wake up waiting for it all to fall apart. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Tell me what the lawyer said. All of it. So Nate did. He told her about the motion, the character witnesses, the tens of thousands this would likely cost before it was over. He told her about Sarah's advantages and his weaknesses, about how on paper Brian could give Emma everything Nate couldn't. And somewhere in the telling, his voice broke. I'm her father, he said roughly. That should be enough. The fact that I love her, that I'm there for her every single day, that I know her favorite book and her biggest fear and exactly how she likes her pancakes, that should matter more than whether I can afford private school or a house with a deck. It does matter, Claire said fiercely. It matters more than anything. Then why doesn't it feel like enough? Claire came around the desk and sat in the chair next to him, close enough that their knees almost touched. Because we've been taught that love is supposed to be measured in dollars and square footage and opportunities. That providing means buying things instead of showing up. But Emma doesn't need a bigger house or a telescope, though I'm sure she loves the telescope. She needs her father. She needs you. What if that's not what the court decides? Then we fight harder. We document every moment you're there for her. We show them what being a parent actually means. Claire paused. I can help, if you'll let me. Not with money. I know you won't accept that. But with organization, strategy. I build systems for a living. Let me help you build a case. Nate looked at her. This woman he'd known for 3 days who was offering to wade into his mess without hesitation. Why would you do that? Because you showed up for me when you didn't have to. Because Emma deserves to keep her father. Because... Claire's voice softened. Because I care about you, both of you, and I want to help. Something in Nate's chest cracked open. I don't know how to let people help me. I don't know how to ask for help, Claire admitted. So maybe we're both learning. They sat there in her office, sunlight streaming through the windows, and Nate felt the weight he'd been carrying alone shift just slightly. Not gone, but shared, and that made all the difference. Thank you, he said quietly. For this. For all of it. You don't have to thank me. That's what people do when they care about each other. Nate's phone buzzed. Emma's school. His heart jumped into his throat as he answered. This is Nate Cole. Mr. Cole, this is Principal Morrison. Emma's fine, but we need you to come pick her up. She's in the nurse's office. She got into an altercation with another student. An altercation? Emma? That didn't sound like his daughter at all. What happened? I'd rather discuss it in person. How soon can you get here? 15 minutes. He stood abruptly, already reaching for his jacket. Claire stood too. What's wrong? Emma got into a fight at school. I have to go. I'm coming with you. Claire, you don't have to... I know I don't have to. I want to. Unless you'd rather handle it alone. Nate looked at her, at the genuine concern in her eyes, and made a decision. I'd like the company. They took Claire's car, a hybrid that was practical and comfortable and somehow exactly right for her. Nate sat in the passenger seat, his leg bouncing with anxiety, while Claire drove with calm efficiency through the midday traffic. She's never been in trouble before, Nate said. Never. She's the kid who reminds other kids to follow the rules. Something must have really upset her. Then we'll find out what and handle it, Claire said simply. Together. The school was a low brick building in a quiet neighborhood, with colorful murals painted on the walls and a playground that had seen better days. Nate had walked Emma through these doors every morning for 3 years, had attended every parent-teacher conference and school play. This building was as familiar to him as his own apartment. Principal Morrison met them in the office, a tall woman with graying hair and an expression that managed to be both stern and sympathetic. Mr. Cole, thank you for coming so quickly. This is Claire Addison, Nate said, then realized he had no idea how to explain who she was. She's a friend, Claire supplied smoothly. I hope it's all right that I came. Of course. Emma's in the nurse's office with an ice pack. She has a split lip, but she's okay. The other child, Tyler Bennett, has a bloody nose. Emma gave someone a bloody nose? Nate couldn't reconcile that image with his gentle daughter who cried when they had to release caterpillars from the butterfly garden. From what the other students tell us, Tyler said something that upset Emma very much. She asked him to stop. He didn't, and she punched him. Principal Morrison's expression was carefully neutral. We have a zero-tolerance policy for violence, Mr. Cole. You know that. Can I talk to her? Find out what he said? Of course. But regardless of what provoked it, Emma will need to be suspended for 3 days. I'm sorry, but those are the rules. Nate's mind was already racing. 3 days meant missing work, rearranging his schedule, possibly having to bring Emma to the office with him. But that was a problem for later. Right now, he needed to see his daughter. Emma was sitting on the nurse's cot, holding an ice pack to her mouth, her eyes red from crying. When she saw Nate, she started crying harder. Daddy, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Nate crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, careful of her injured lip. Hey, it's okay. You're okay. Tell me what happened. Tyler said, Emma's voice broke. He said that Mommy was leaving because of me, that she was moving to Denver because I wasn't a good enough daughter to make her want to stay. Nate felt rage surge through him, hot and protective. He forced his voice to stay calm. And what did you do? I told him that wasn't true, that Mommy was moving because of her job and because she loves Brian, but he kept saying it, and everyone was listening, and I asked him 3 times to stop. Emma looked up at him with devastated eyes. I asked him to stop, Daddy, just like you taught me, but he wouldn't, and I got so mad, and then I hit him. Okay, Nate said, smoothing her hair back. Okay, sweetheart. Am I in trouble? You're suspended for 3 days, but we'll talk about that later. Right now, I just need to know, are you okay? Does your lip hurt? A little, but I'm more sad than hurt. Emma noticed Claire standing in the doorway, and her eyes widened. Claire, what are you doing here? Claire stepped forward carefully. Your dad called me, and I wanted to make sure you were all right. Is it okay that I'm here? Emma nodded, then reached out for Claire's hand. Tyler was being really mean. I heard, Claire said gently, sitting on the cot next to her. And I'm sorry someone said something so hurtful to you. It's not true, right? Mommy's not leaving because of me? Claire looked at Nate, silently asking permission. He nodded slightly. No, sweetheart, Claire said firmly. Your mommy is making choices about her own life and her own future. Those choices have nothing to do with you not being good enough. You're more than good enough. You're brilliant and kind and brave. But I hit someone. That's not brave. No, Claire agreed. That's not the best choice. But standing up for yourself when someone is being cruel, that took courage. You just need to find better ways to do it. That's what Daddy always says. Use your words, not your hands. Your daddy's very smart, Claire said. After talking with Principal Morrison and agreeing to the suspension, they drove Emma home. She fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the emotional upheaval, and Nate sat in the passenger seat feeling like he'd aged 10 years in one afternoon. I need to call Sarah, he said quietly. Let her know what happened. Do you want privacy? No, stay, please. The call went about as well as Nate expected. Sarah was horrified that Emma had been in a fight, concerned about the suspension, and completely missed the point when Nate tried to explain what had triggered it. Kids say mean things, Nate. Emma needs to learn to handle that without resorting to violence. A kid told our daughter that you were abandoning her because she wasn't good enough. That's not just mean, Sarah. That's cruel. And it's rooted in truth. You are leaving her. I'm not abandoning her. We've been over this. Denver is a great opportunity. For you, it's a great opportunity for you and Brian. What about what's a great opportunity for Emma? Staying in the place she knows, with the people she loves, with her father who's been there for her every single day of her life. You're being unreasonable. I'm being a parent. You should try it sometime. He hung up before he said something worse, his hands shaking. Claire reached over and took his hand. Breathe. I can't lose her, Nate said, his voice breaking. I can't. She's everything to me. I know, and we're going to fight for her, but right now she needs you to be calm and present. Can you do that? Nate took a shaky breath, then another. Yeah, I can do that. They got Emma home and settled on the couch with her favorite blanket and a movie about space exploration. Claire offered to leave, to give them family time, but Emma grabbed her hand. Can Claire stay, please? She makes things feel less scary. Nate looked at Claire, saw the emotion in her eyes, and nodded. If she wants to. I want to, Claire said softly. So they stayed. Claire made grilled cheese sandwiches for dinner while Nate sat with Emma and talked about feelings and choices and better ways to handle mean kids. Emma listened seriously, asking questions about what to do if Tyler said more mean things, about whether Daddy was going to be in trouble for her getting suspended. No one's in trouble, Nate assured her. We're just going to spend 3 days together, and we're going to have some talks about using our words and controlling our anger. But I love you, and nothing you could do would ever change that. Even if I hit someone? Even then, though I really hope you won't make a habit of it. Emma smiled a little through her swollen lip. I won't. It hurt my hand. After dinner, Emma asked if Claire could read her bedtime story. Nate started to protest. That was his job, his special time with his daughter, but Claire caught his eye. Maybe we could both read, she suggested. Take turns? So they did. They sat on either side of Emma in her small bed, reading alternating pages of a book about a girl who wanted to be an astronaut, and somewhere in the middle of it, Emma's hand found Claire's and held on tight. When Emma was asleep, they retreated to the living room. Nate's apartment was small, a 2-bedroom in an older building, nothing fancy, but clean and comfortable and full of evidence of his daughter's presence. Drawings covered the refrigerator, library books were stacked on every surface, and a half-built model of the solar system dominated the dining table. I'm sorry, Nate said, sinking onto the couch. This is not how I imagined our third date going. Is that what this is? Our third date? I don't know what to call it. You've met my daughter, helped me through a custody crisis, and made grilled cheese in my kitchen. That feels like more than dating. Claire sat next to him, close enough that their shoulders touched. Maybe we're not very good at taking things slow. Maybe taking things slow is overrated when you're both tired of waiting for your life to start. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Claire said carefully, Can I tell you something about why I wanted to come today? Of course. When Emma grabbed my hand and asked me to stay, I felt something I haven't felt in 8 years, like I mattered to someone. Not because of what I could do for them or provide for them, but just because I was there and they wanted me to be. Claire's voice was thick with emotion. Marcus left because I couldn't give him children. He looked at me and saw only what I couldn't do, what I couldn't be. But today, Emma looked at me like I was exactly what she needed, exactly when she needed it, and I didn't have to be anyone except who I am. Nate turned to face her, taking both her hands. You are exactly what we both needed. And I know this is fast and probably reckless, and definitely not how either of us planned to do this. But I don't care. I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of protecting myself from hope. You make me want to try again. You make me feel brave, Claire whispered. Like maybe it's not too late for me. Like maybe I'm not broken after all. You're not broken. You're just someone who got hurt by people who couldn't see your value. But I see it, Claire. I see you. They moved toward each other at the same moment, and when their lips met, it felt like coming home. The kiss was soft and careful and full of all the things they hadn't yet found words for, hope and fear, and the desperate need to believe that maybe, this time, choosing to try wouldn't end in heartbreak. When they pulled apart, Claire was crying. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm crying. Because it matters, Nate said, wiping her tears with his thumb. Because you're letting yourself feel again, and that's terrifying and beautiful and exactly right. What are we doing, Nate? I don't know. Building something, maybe? Taking a chance? Refusing to let other people's failures define what's possible for us? He paused. Is that okay? Are we okay? We're better than okay, Claire said. We're exactly what we need. They spent the rest of the evening talking about Emma's suspension and the custody battle, about Claire's upcoming meeting with her mother and Nate's financial worries. They talked about their fears and their hopes, about what they wanted and what they were afraid to want. And somewhere in the talking, they both realized that they'd found something rare. Someone who understood not just the pain, but the pattern, who'd been hurt in similar ways and had learned the same protective responses. When Claire finally left, well past midnight, Nate stood in his doorway and watched her walk to her car. She turned back before getting in, and they looked at each other across the distance. Two people who'd been broken and were choosing, against all evidence and experience, to try again. The next morning, Nate woke to Emma crawling into his bed, her lips still swollen, but her spirits improved. "Daddy, can Claire come over again today? She said she'd help me with my space project." "She has to work, sweetheart, but maybe this weekend." "Okay." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Daddy, do you like Claire?" "I do, very much. Is that okay with you?" Emma considered this with the seriousness of someone making an important decision. "I like her too. She's nice. And she listens when I talk about space, not like Mommy's boyfriend who always checks his phone." "Brian checks his phone when you're talking to him?" "All the time. But it's okay because Mommy says he's very busy and important." Emma snuggled closer. "You're important too, Daddy. You're the most important person to me." Nate held his daughter close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, and felt the weight of everything he stood to lose. But he also felt the strength that came from knowing what he was fighting for. Not just custody or time or legal rights, but this. These quiet morning moments, these conversations, this love that was unconditional and fierce and worth any battle. "You're the most important person to me too, Em. Always." That afternoon, while Emma was absorbed in her space project, Nate's phone rang. Patricia Chen. "Mr. Cole, I wanted to update you. Sarah's lawyer filed a response to our motion. They're arguing that the move to Denver is in Emma's best interest. Better schools, more resources, a two-parent household. They're also suggesting that your work schedule and financial situation make it difficult for you to provide adequate care." Nate's blood ran cold. "My work schedule is normal. I'm there for Emma every day. I've never missed a school event or a doctor's appointment." "I know, and we'll document all of that. But I need to warn you, they're going to make this about stability and resources. They're going to try to paint you as well-meaning but limited. We need to counter that narrative." "How?" "By showing that what Emma needs most isn't money or opportunities, it's her father. I'll need you to gather documentation, school records showing your involvement, letters from teachers, neighbors, anyone who can speak to your relationship with Emma and your capabilities as a parent. Can you do that?" "Yes, whatever it takes." After he hung up, Nate sat staring at his phone, the magnitude of the fight ahead settling over him like a weight. He needed letters. He needed proof. He needed to convince a judge that being present mattered more than being wealthy, that showing up mattered more than providing luxuries. He texted Claire. "Need advice on building a custody case. You said you'd help with strategy. Still offering?" Her response was immediate. "Absolutely. Come to my office tomorrow. We'll build you something unassailable." That night, after Emma was asleep, Nate sat at his dining table, surrounded by photos and report cards and Emma's artwork. He started making a list of everyone who could speak to his character, his involvement, his love for his daughter, teachers, neighbors, other parents from Emma's class, his boss, his co-workers, his therapist. His phone buzzed. "Claire, how are you holding up?" "Honestly, I'm terrified. What if it's not enough? What if loving her completely isn't sufficient to keep her?" Then we make sure the court sees what sufficient actually means. They need to see you the way Emma sees you, as everything. How do I show them that? You let me help. Trust me to do what I do best, take complicated information and make it impossible to ignore. We're going to build you a case that shows exactly who you are and why that matters more than anything Brian can offer. Nate stared at the message, at this woman who barely knew him offering to fight his battle like it was her own. "Why are you doing this?" "Because Emma needs her father. Because you deserve to win. Because someone showed up for me when I needed it, and I'm returning the favor." A pause, then, "And because I care about you. More than is probably wise after 3 days, but there it is. I care about you too. More than I thought possible this quickly. Then let me help you. Let me be part of this fight." "Okay. Thank you, Claire. Don't thank me yet. Wait until we win." Nate set his phone down and looked at the pile of evidence surrounding him. Proof of his love, his presence, his commitment. It would have to be enough. Because the alternative, losing Emma, watching her move 800 miles away, becoming a weekend father who missed the daily moments that made up a childhood, was unthinkable. He picked up a photo of Emma on her last birthday, covered in chocolate cake and laughing at something he'd said, and he made himself a promise. He would fight. He would use every resource, accept every offered help, build the strongest case possible. And if he lost anyway, it wouldn't be because he hadn't tried hard enough or loved her enough or fought hard enough. It would just mean the system was broken, not him. But he wasn't going to lose. He couldn't afford to. Emma was worth everything, his savings, his pride, his carefully guarded heart. She was worth opening himself up to Claire and accepting help and believing that maybe, just maybe, the universe owed him one win after 3 years of losses. Outside his window, Seattle was settling into night, lights twinkling across the city like earthbound stars. Somewhere out there, Claire was probably still working, probably thinking about custody strategies and how to help him win. Somewhere out there, Sarah was planning her move to Denver, convinced she was doing what was best. And somewhere in the bedroom down the hall, Emma was sleeping peacefully, trusting that her father would keep her safe. Nate wouldn't let her down. Whatever it took, however hard the fight, he would show the court what really mattered. Not money or houses or opportunities, but presence and love and the quiet daily choice to show up for the people who needed you. He opened his laptop and started typing, beginning the hardest letter he'd ever written. A statement to the court explaining why Emma belonged with him, why their life together was exactly what she needed, why being her father was the most important thing he'd ever done or would ever do. And as he wrote, he felt something shift inside him. Not hope exactly, not yet, but determination, resolve, the bone-deep certainty that he was fighting for something that mattered more than his own comfort or pride or fear of losing. He was fighting for his daughter, and that made him braver than he'd ever been before. The conference room at Addison Analytics was all glass and white boards, and the kind of quiet efficiency that came from a company that knew exactly what it was doing. Claire had cleared her schedule for the entire afternoon, and now she sat across from Nate with her laptop open, a legal pad covered in notes, and an expression of focused determination that made her look like she was preparing for war. Which, Nate supposed, she was. "Okay," Claire said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Patricia said you need documentation of your involvement in Emma's life. So we're going to build a timeline, every school event, every doctor's appointment, every parent-teacher conference. We're going to show a pattern of consistent, engaged parenting that spans years." "How do we prove that? I don't exactly have receipts for bedtime stories." "No, but you have emails, school newsletters that went to your address, appointment confirmations, photos with metadata showing you were at every birthday party, every field trip." Claire pulled up a spreadsheet that was already half filled with dates and categories. "I started building a framework last night. We just need to populate it with your specific information." Nate stared at the screen, at the level of organization Claire had already put into this. "You did this last night? After you left my apartment at midnight?" "I couldn't sleep. My brain needed something to do, and helping you felt more productive than lying awake worrying about whether I'm too old to be doing this." "Doing what?" Claire looked up from her laptop, vulnerability flickering across her face. "Falling for someone. Opening myself up to caring about people who might leave. Being someone's—" She stopped, shaking her head. "Never mind. We're here to work on your case." "Claire." Nate reached across the table and took her hand. "What were you going to say?" "Being someone's person," she finished quietly. "Being important to someone beyond what I can do for them professionally. I'm terrified I'm getting this wrong, that I'm moving too fast, that I'm setting myself up for the same heartbreak all over again." "You're not getting it wrong," Nate said. "And you're not too old or too anything. You're exactly right." "You can't know that. We've known each other less than a week." "I know that you showed up at Emma's school without being asked. I know that you spent last night building a legal strategy instead of sleeping. I know that my daughter asked for you when she was scared and you didn't hesitate. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." Claire's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "What if I'm not enough? What if you need someone who can give you things I can't? Someone younger, someone who can—" She stopped, her voice breaking. "Someone who can what? Have children?" Nate said it gently but firmly. "Claire, I have a daughter. I don't need more children. I need someone who sees Emma as a person worth knowing, not an obstacle to work around. I need someone who makes me feel like I'm not fighting alone anymore. That's you. You're already more than enough. Marcus said I wasn't. He said that not being able to have children made me incomplete. Then Marcus was an idiot who didn't deserve you. Nate squeezed her hand. You're complete exactly as you are, and Emma adores you. That matters more to me than anything. Claire wiped at her eyes, then took a shaky breath. Okay. But if we're doing this, really doing this, you need to know something about me. What's that? When I care about something, I go all in. I don't do halfway. So if we're building this case, we're building it to win. And if we're building something between us, I'm not going to be casual about it. I'm going to care too much and probably scare you with how intense I can be. Good, Nate said, because I don't want casual. I want someone who cares as much as I do. Someone who fights as hard as I do. Someone who shows up completely, even when it's terrifying. They looked at each other across the conference table. Two people who'd been told they were too much or not enough. Who'd learned to make themselves smaller to fit other people's expectations. Who were choosing, right here, right now, to stop apologizing for who they were. All right then, Claire said, turning back to her laptop with renewed focus. Let's build you an unbeatable case. Start from the beginning. When did you first take Emma to the doctor after the divorce? They worked for hours, Nate pulling up emails and photos on his phone, while Claire organized everything into categories: medical care, education, extracurricular activities, daily routines. Every piece of evidence was time-stamped, cross-referenced, built into a narrative that showed not just involvement, but devotion. This is incredible, Nate said, watching the spreadsheet grow. How did you learn to do this? I build data systems for hospitals. This is just another way of organizing information to tell a story. Claire's fingers didn't slow on the keyboard. The story we're telling is that you're not just a parent who shows up. You're the parent who knows Emma's teacher's name, her favorite lunch, the friend she sits with at recess. You're the parent who reads about black holes because she's interested in them. You're the parent who stays up late building science projects and wakes up early to make star-shaped pancakes. Sarah does those things too, Nate said quietly. She loves Emma. This isn't about her being a bad mother. No, it's about Emma needing stability and consistency. It's about not uprooting her from everything familiar for adult reasons. Claire looked up from her screen. Can I ask you something? Do you think Sarah really believes Denver is better for Emma? Or is she just choosing Brian over you and trying to justify it? Nate was quiet for a long moment. I think she believes it. Sarah's not cruel. She's just convinced herself that what's good for her and Brian must be good for Emma too. That a bigger house and better schools outweigh having daily access to both parents. But you don't believe that. I believe Emma needs her father. I believe that being there for the small moments matters more than providing big opportunities. And I believe that if I let Sarah take her to Denver without fighting, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Claire saved the spreadsheet and sat back. Then we make sure that doesn't happen. Tomorrow, I want you to start collecting letters. Teachers, neighbors, parents from Emma's school. Anyone who can speak to your relationship with her and your capabilities as a father. I don't even know what to ask for. You ask them to be honest. Tell them what's happening and that you need their help. The people who know you will show up. I promise. Nate's phone buzzed. Emma's school again. His heart sank as he answered. This is Nate Cole. Mr. Cole, this is Mrs. Patterson, Emma's teacher. I heard about the suspension and I wanted to reach out. Is Emma okay? She's doing better, thank you. I'm sorry about the incident. It's completely out of character for her. I know it is. That's actually why I'm calling. Emma is one of my best students, kind, thoughtful, always following the rules. For her to lash out like that, something must have really upset her. I want you to know that I'm here if you need anything. A letter of support, a character reference, whatever would help. Nate felt his throat tighten. How did you know I might need that? Emma mentioned that her mother might be moving away. I put two and two together. Mrs. Dutt. Patterson's voice was gentle. Emma talks about you constantly, Mr. Cole. How you help with her homework. How you take her to the library every week. How you learned about space just so you could answer her questions. Whatever is happening with custody, I want you to know that I see what kind of father you are. And I'm happy to tell a court the same thing. Thank you, Nate managed. That means more than you know. After he hung up, he looked at Claire with wonder. Her teacher just offered to write a letter. Because people who actually know you see what I see. A father who shows up, who cares, who puts his daughter first. That's the story we're going to tell. Claire closed her laptop and stood. Come on, you've been staring at data for 3 hours. You need a break. I should get back to Emma. The neighbor's watching her, but then let's pick her up together. I promised I'd help with her space project, remember? They drove to Nate's apartment in Claire's car, and something about the domesticity of it, Claire behind the wheel, Nate giving directions, both of them heading to pick up his daughter, felt both terrifying and exactly right. When they arrived, Emma flew out of the neighbor's apartment and threw herself at Claire with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for birthday presents. You came! I thought you had to work all day. I did work all day, Claire said, hugging her back. I was helping your dad with something important, but now I'm here, and I believe we have a solar system to build. Emma's face lit up. Can we work on it at Claire's house? She has a bigger table. Nate started to protest. They'd already imposed so much, but Claire caught his eye and nodded. I think that's a great idea. We can order pizza again. Make an evening of it. So they packed up Emma's project supplies and drove to Claire's house. And somewhere along the way, this stopped feeling like dating or even friendship and started feeling like something bigger, like family, like home. Claire's dining table became a workshop covered in styrofoam balls and paint and string as Emma explained her vision for a scale model of the solar system. Nate helped measure distances while Claire looked up facts on her laptop, and together they built something that was part science project, part family activity, part promise of what could be. Jupiter needs to be way bigger than Earth, Emma explained seriously. It's huge, like you could fit over 1,000 Earths inside it. That's incredible, Claire said. No wonder you love it so much. Brian says I should focus on Mars instead because it's more realistic for future colonization. Emma's voice was carefully neutral, but Nate heard the hurt underneath. Brian's not wrong about Mars being important, Claire said carefully, but there's nothing wrong with being excited about Jupiter. You're allowed to love whatever captures your imagination. That's the best part of science. You get to explore what fascinates you. That's what Daddy says too. Your daddy's very smart. While Emma was absorbed in painting Saturn's rings, Nate helped Claire in the kitchen. They moved around each other with surprising ease, Claire chopping vegetables while Nate stirred sauce, both of them stealing glances at Emma through the doorway. She's incredible, Claire said softly. You've done an amazing job with her. Most of that is just her. She came into the world curious and kind. I just try not to mess it up. You're doing more than not messing it up. You're giving her space to be exactly who she is. That's the greatest gift a parent can give. Nate set down the spoon and turned to face her. Come on. Can I ask you something? And you can say no, but I need to know. Of course. If this goes to court, if it gets ugly, are you going to stay? Or is this going to be too much, too complicated, too messy for someone who's got her life together? Claire met his eyes steadily. I'm staying, however ugly it gets, however long it takes. I'm not going anywhere. How can you promise that? You don't know what it's going to be like. No, but I know what it's like to walk away from something hard and regret it. I know what it's like to choose safety over possibility and end up alone anyway. I'm done making those choices, Nate. I'm choosing to stay. I'm choosing you, both of you. Nate crossed the distance between them and kissed her, slow and deep and full of gratitude and wonder. When they pulled apart, Emma was standing in the doorway, watching them with a small smile. Are you guys boyfriend and girlfriend now? Nate and Claire looked at each other, then at Emma. Would that be okay with you? Nate asked carefully. Emma considered this seriously. I think so. Claire's nice and she makes you smile more. You've been sad a lot since Mommy left. I like it when you're not sad. Come here, Em. Nate held out his arms and Emma came over for a hug. You know that whatever happens with Claire, or with Mommy and Brian, or with anything else, you're the most important person in my life, right? Nothing changes that. I know, Daddy. Emma pulled back and looked up at Claire. But I like Claire being here too. Is that okay? That's more than okay, Claire said, her voice thick with emotion. I like being here with both of you. They ate dinner together at the table covered in planet models and paint supplies, Emma chattering about her project and how she was going to present it to her class when her suspension was over. After dinner, while Emma was in the bathroom washing paint off her hands, Nate's phone rang. Sarah. He almost didn't answer, but Claire nodded encouragement. Hello? Nate, we need to talk. My lawyer says you filed a motion to prevent the move. Is that true? Yes, I'm not letting you take Emma to Denver without a fight. Why are you doing this? We could have worked something out. More time in the summer, holidays, video calls. Because Emma needs her father, Sarah, not video calls, not summer visits. She needs me here, every day, the way I've been here every day since you left. This is about you being bitter that I moved on, that I found someone who can give me the life I deserve. Nate felt Claire's hand on his shoulder, grounding him. This has nothing to do with you and Brian. This is about Emma's stability and her right to have both parents actively in her life. You made your choice when you left. You don't get to make this one. The court's going to see that Brian can provide better opportunities. The court's going to see that I've been Emma's primary caregiver in every way that matters. They're going to see who takes her to school, who helps with homework, who stays home when she's sick. And they're going to see that you're willing to disrupt all of that for your boyfriend's job. He's my fiancé. We're getting married in the spring. Congratulations. That doesn't change anything. Sarah was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was tight. I never thought you'd do this. I thought you'd be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I'm being a father. Maybe you should try being a mother and put Emma's needs before your own for once. He hung up, his hands shaking. Emma was standing in the doorway again, her expression worried. Was that Mommy? Are you fighting about me? Nate pulled her close. We're not fighting about you, sweetheart. We're trying to figure out what's best for you. That's different. I don't want to move to Denver, Emma said in a small voice. I like my school and my friends and my room. And I don't want to leave you. I know, baby, and I'm doing everything I can to make sure you don't have to. Claire knelt down to Emma's level. Hey, sweetheart, this is really hard, and it's scary, and it's okay to have big feelings about it. But you need to know something. Your dad is fighting for you because he loves you so much. And whatever happens, you're going to be okay. How do you know? Because you have people who love you and will do anything to keep you safe and happy. That's the most important thing anyone can have. Emma looked between them, then nodded slowly. Can I finish my project? Working on space stuff makes me feel better. Absolutely, Claire said. While Emma returned to her solar system, Nate sank onto the couch, emotionally exhausted. Claire sat beside him, close enough that their thighs touched. That was brutal, she said quietly. That was just the beginning. It's going to get worse before it gets better. Nate rubbed his face. Maybe you should reconsider this whole thing. You didn't sign up for custody battles and angry ex-wives. I signed up for you, Claire said firmly. All of you, including the messy parts. Stop trying to give me an out. I just don't want you to wake up one day and realize this is too much. Then let me decide what's too much. Claire took his hand. I'm a 46-year-old woman who runs a company with 240 employees. I handle complex problems every day. I think I can handle your ex-wife in a custody battle. It's different when it's personal, which is exactly why I want to help. Because it is personal. Because I care about you and Emma. Because for the first time in 8 years, I'm part of something that matters more than quarterly earnings and data systems. Nate looked at her, at this brilliant, accomplished woman who was choosing to wade into his mess without hesitation, and felt something click into place. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. How to let someone in. How to trust that they'll stay when things get hard. Me neither. But maybe we figure it out together. One day at a time, remember? One day at a time, Nate repeated. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching Emma work on her project, and Nate felt the weight he'd been carrying shift. Not gone, but distributed. Shared. And that made all the difference. Later that night, after Emma had fallen asleep on Claire's couch again, and Nate had carried her to his car, he and Claire stood in her doorway saying goodbye. Thank you, Nate said, for everything today. The case preparation, the help with Emma's project, just being here. Stop thanking me. This is what people do when they care about each other. I know, but Nate stopped, searching for the right words. I'm falling for you, Claire. Fast and hard and probably recklessly. And and it terrifies me because I don't know if I can survive losing someone again." "Then don't lose me," Claire said simply. "Choose to trust that I'm staying. Choose to believe that this time it's different." "How do you know it's different?" "Because we're different. We've both been broken, and we know what that feels like. We're not going to do that to each other." Claire reached up and touched his face gently. "I'm falling for you too, Nate. For you and for Emma and for the life we could build together. And I'm choosing to believe that's worth the risk. Even though we've only known each other a week, especially because we've only known each other a week, and it already feels like coming home. That doesn't happen often. When it does, you don't let it go just because it's scary." Nate kissed her again, slower this time, memorizing the taste of her lips and the feel of her hands in his hair. When they pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. "I should go," Nate said. "Emma's asleep in the car." "Text me when you're home safe?" "I will. And Claire, thank you for choosing us. Thank you for letting me." Nate drove home through quiet streets, Emma sleeping in the back seat, his mind full of everything that had happened in one impossibly long day. A week ago, he'd been alone in a coffee shop, hiding from his own loneliness. Now he had Claire, brilliant, kind, fierce Claire, who was willing to fight his battles like they were her own. When he got Emma into bed, he sat on the edge of her mattress and watched her sleep. She looked so peaceful, so young, and he felt the familiar surge of protective love that made him capable of anything. He would fight Sarah. He would build an unbeatable case. He would do whatever it took to keep his daughter here, in the life they'd built together, and he wouldn't do it alone. He had Claire now, and Patricia, and Mrs. Patterson, and a whole network of people who saw what kind of father he was and were willing to stand up for him. That had to be enough. It had to be. His phone buzzed. "Claire, did you make it home okay?" "Yes. Just got Emma into bed. She didn't even wake up during the transfer. She trusts you completely." "That's beautiful. I don't want to let her down. You won't. You're incapable of it." "Sleep well, Nate. Tomorrow we start gathering those letters. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for giving me something to believe in." Nate set his phone down and sat in the darkness of Emma's room, listening to her breathe. Tomorrow he would start asking for help, building his case, fighting for his daughter with everything he had. Tomorrow he would prove that being present mattered more than being wealthy, that showing up mattered more than providing luxuries, that love, constant, devoted, unwavering love, was worth more than anything money could buy. But tonight, he just sat with his daughter and let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, the universe was finally on his side. That maybe all the years of being told he wasn't enough had been preparing him for this moment, when he would have to stand up and insist that he was exactly enough, that what he offered was exactly what Emma needed. And somewhere across the city, Claire was lying awake thinking about the same things, about second chances and unexpected love and the terrifying beauty of letting yourself hope again. About a 7-year-old girl who loved black holes and a quiet man who'd shown her that kindness still existed in the world. About building something new from the broken pieces of the past. They were both scared. They were both scarred. They were both carrying wounds from people who'd told them they weren't enough. But they were choosing to try anyway, choosing to believe that this time it could be different, choosing to fight for something that mattered more than protecting themselves from potential heartbreak. And that choice, that decision to be brave when every instinct screamed to be careful, was the beginning of something neither of them had dared to hope for. It was the beginning of becoming whole. The courthouse steps were cold beneath Nate's feet, even through his dress shoes. He'd worn his best suit, the one he saved for job interviews and funerals, and he felt like he was dressed for both. Emma was with Claire's neighbor for the day, safely away from whatever was about to happen inside that imposing building with its stone columns, and the kind of quiet that suggested judgment was a sacred thing. Patricia Chen stood beside him, her briefcase in one hand and a folder thick with evidence in the other. "Are you ready?" Nate wasn't sure he'd ever be ready to walk into a courtroom and fight for the right to keep his daughter, but he nodded anyway. "As I'll ever be. Remember what we practiced. Answer the questions directly. Don't get emotional. Let the evidence speak for itself." Patricia's expression softened. "You're a good father, Nate. The judge is going to see that." They walked into the building together, through metal detectors and down hallways that echoed with their footsteps. Sarah was already there with her lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit who probably charged more per hour than Nate made in a week. Brian stood beside Sarah, his hand on her back in a gesture that was probably meant to be supportive, but made Nate's stomach clench with something that felt dangerously close to jealousy. Sarah looked nervous. That was some small comfort. She should be nervous. She was trying to take their daughter 800 miles away, and she should have to answer for that. The courtroom was smaller than Nate expected, less dramatic, just wood paneling and fluorescent lights and a judge's bench that seemed impossibly high. Judge Morrison, no relation to Emma's principal, Patricia had assured him, was a woman in her 60s with gray hair and an expression that gave nothing away. The hearing began with opening statements. Sarah's lawyer painted a picture of opportunity and stability, better schools, a two-parent household, financial security. She made Denver sound like the promised land and Seattle sound like Nate was barely holding things together. Then Patricia stood up and everything changed. Your Honor, this case isn't about which parent can provide more material advantages. It's about what's in the best interest of Emma Cole, a 7-year-old girl who has lived her entire life in Seattle, who has a father who has been her primary caregiver in every meaningful way since the divorce, who has a community and a school and a stability that her mother is asking this court to disrupt, not because Emma needs it, but because it's convenient for the mother's new life. Patricia laid out the case methodically. The spreadsheet Claire had helped build, showing Nate's involvement in every aspect of Emma's life. The letters from teachers and neighbors and parents from Emma's school, all speaking to his character and his devotion. The evidence that he'd never missed a school event, a doctor's appointment, a chance to be present in his daughter's life. Then it was time for testimony. Sarah went first, explaining about Brian's job offer, about the opportunities in Denver, about how this was a chance for their family, she corrected herself quickly, her new family, to build something together. And what about Emma's relationship with her father? The judge asked. Nate's a good father. I'm not trying to take that away from him, but Emma would still see him. Summers, holidays, video calls. Kids are resilient. She'd adjust. Has Emma expressed an opinion about the move? Sarah hesitated. She's 7. She doesn't fully understand what's best for her. But has she expressed an opinion? She said she doesn't want to go, but again, she's a child. She doesn't have the perspective to understand. Thank you, Ms. Bennett. The judge's tone was neutral, but something in her expression shifted. Then it was Nate's turn. He walked to the witness stand on legs that felt unsteady, placed his hand on the Bible even though he'd never been particularly religious, and swore to tell the truth. As if he could do anything else when his daughter's future hung in the balance. Patricia asked him about his daily routine with Emma, and Nate described morning pancakes and evening homework help, library trips, and bedtime stories about astronauts exploring distant worlds. He described how Emma told him about her day every night at dinner, how she came to him first with her fears and her dreams, how they'd built a life together that wasn't fancy or impressive but was theirs. Mr. Cole, Patricia said carefully, can you tell the court about the incident at school last week? Nate took a breath and explained about Tyler, about the cruel things said, about Emma defending herself in the only way she knew how. She asked him to stop 3 times, just like I taught her, but when he wouldn't, she felt like she had no choice but to make him stop physically. It wasn't right, but I understand why she did it, because someone told her that her mother was leaving because she wasn't good enough, and that's... His voice cracked. That's the worst thing you can tell a child who's already scared of being abandoned. And how have you addressed this with Emma? We've talked about better ways to handle conflict, about using our words and asking for help from adults, about how violence is never the answer, even when someone is being cruel. But I've also told her that the core fear behind her reaction, that she's somehow responsible for the adults in her life making choices that hurt her, is completely wrong. None of this is her fault. Sarah's lawyer cross-examined him, trying to make his modest income and small apartment sound inadequate, trying to suggest that his work schedule didn't leave enough time for proper supervision, trying to paint him as well-meaning but limited. But Nate had letters. He had Mrs. Patterson's testimony about what kind of father he was. He had neighbors who described how Emma ran to him when he got home from work, how they heard laughter from his apartment in the evenings, how he was always present at the playground, always engaged, always there. The hearing lasted 4 hours. By the end, Nate felt wrung out, exhausted, like he'd run a marathon while carrying something infinitely precious. The judge thanked everyone for their testimony and said she'd issue her ruling within the week. Outside the courthouse, Nate stood on those cold stone steps and tried to breathe. Patricia put a hand on his shoulder. "You did well, really well. I think we have a strong case. But you can't promise we'll win." "No, I can't promise that. But I can tell you that you showed that judge who you are and what you mean to Emma. That matters." Nate nodded numbly. Sarah approached cautiously, Brian hanging back near their car. "Nate, She stopped, seeming uncertain. "I didn't want it to go this way. I hoped we could work something out." "You could have worked something out by not trying to move our daughter across the country. This job is important to Brian, to us, to our future. And Emma's important to me, to her future. You made your choice 3 years ago, Sarah. You chose to leave to build a new life, and I accepted that. But Emma stays with me. If you want to move to Denver, that's your decision, but you're not taking her with you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "She's my daughter, too." "Then act like it. Put her needs before your convenience. Stay in Seattle or go to Denver alone, or figure out some other solution. But stop trying to make Emma pay the price for your choices." He walked away before she could respond, before the anger and fear and exhaustion could break through the careful control he'd been maintaining all day. His phone buzzed. "Claire, how did it go?" "I don't know. Judge will rule within the week." "Can I see you? I'm at your apartment. I picked Emma up early. We're making cookies." Nate felt something in his chest ease slightly. Of course, Claire was at his apartment, taking care of his daughter, making everything feel less impossible. He drove home through afternoon traffic, his mind replaying the hearing over and over, trying to guess what the judge was thinking, whether he'd said the right things, whether the evidence was enough. When he opened his apartment door, the smell of chocolate chip cookies hit him first, followed immediately by Emma launching herself into his arms. "Daddy, how did it go? Do I have to move?" Nate held her tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo and cookie dough. "I don't know yet, sweetheart. The judge needs time to make her decision, but I did everything I could to make sure you can stay here with me." "Good, because I really don't want to go to Denver. No offense to Mommy and Brian, but this is my home." Claire appeared in the kitchen doorway, flour on her cheek and concern in her eyes. Nate met her gaze over Emma's head, and she gave him a small, encouraging smile. "Why don't you go finish decorating those cookies?" Claire suggested to Emma. "I bet your dad could use one of your special creations." Emma nodded seriously and ran back to the kitchen. Claire crossed to Nate and pulled him into a hug without asking if he needed one. He let himself sink into it, let himself be held, let himself stop being strong for just a moment. "It was awful," he said against her hair. "Sarah's lawyer made it sound like I'm barely scraping by, like Emma would be better off with them and their money and their opportunities. What if the judge agrees? Then we appeal, we keep fighting. But Nate, you're not barely scraping by. You're raising an incredible daughter in a home full of love. That's not nothing. What if it's not enough? It will be. It has to be." They stood there in his small living room, holding each other while Emma sang off-key in the kitchen about planets and cookies and everything that made 7-year-old life worth living. And Nate let himself believe just for a moment that Claire was right, that love and presence and showing up every single day had to matter more than money and square footage. The week that followed was the longest of Nate's life. He went to work, helped Emma with homework, made dinners and did laundry, and tried to pretend that his entire world wasn't hanging in the balance. Claire came over every evening, bringing groceries and helping with Emma's bedtime routine, and just being there in a way that made everything feel slightly less terrifying. On Thursday night, while Emma was asleep, Nate and Claire sat on his couch with glasses of wine. Neither of them was really drinking. "I keep thinking about what happens if I lose," Nate said quietly. "About what it means to be a weekend father, to miss the daily moments, to become the parent she sees occasionally instead of the one she comes home to every day." "You're not going to lose." "You can't know that." "No, but I can believe it. And I can believe that whatever happens, you're not facing it alone anymore." Nate looked at her, at this woman who'd walked into his life less than 2 weeks ago and had somehow become essential. "I love you," he said, the words surprising him as much as they probably surprised her. I know it's too soon and probably crazy, but I love you. You and your spreadsheets and your fierce loyalty and the way you look at Emma like she's the most interesting person you've ever met. I love you. Claire's eyes filled with tears. I love you too, and you're right. It's too soon and probably crazy, but I don't care. I love the way you show up for people. I love the way you make pancakes shaped like stars and learn about black holes just to connect with your daughter. I love that you bought me a flower when you barely knew me because you wanted me to feel valued. I love you, Nate. They kissed like people who'd found something they didn't know they were looking for, like people who'd been told they were too old or too broken or too late and had decided to believe something different. When they pulled apart, they were both crying a little. What happens if the judge rules in Sarah's favor? Claire asked. Then I appeal, and I keep fighting, and I make sure Emma knows that I never stop trying to keep her. And what happens with us? If you're spending all your time and money on appeals? Nate took her hand. We figure it out, one day at a time, together, if you still want to. I still want to. Whatever comes, I'm staying. Even if it's messy and complicated and expensive? Especially then, because that's when people need someone the most, when things are hard. And I'm done walking away from hard things because they're scary. They sat together in the quiet of his apartment, two people who'd been broken choosing to be brave, choosing to build something from the pieces they had left. And somewhere down the hall, Emma slept peacefully, dreaming of planets and possibilities, trusting that the adults in her life would figure things out. The call came on Friday afternoon. Nate was in a meeting when his phone buzzed with Patricia's number. He excused himself and stepped into the hallway, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Nate, Patricia said, and he couldn't read her tone. The judge issued her ruling. And? She denied Sarah's petition to relocate. Emma stays in Seattle with you. Nate's legs went weak. He sat down hard on the floor of the hallway, his phone pressed to his ear. Say that again. Emma stays with you. The judge ruled that the move would be detrimental to her well-being and that Sarah failed to prove it was in Emma's best interest. You won, Nate. I won, he repeated, not quite believing it. Emma stays. Emma stays. Congratulations. You fought hard for this, and you deserve to win. After he hung up, Nate sat in that hallway for a full minute, just breathing. Then he called Claire. We won, he said when she answered. The judge ruled in our favor. Emma stays. Claire made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Oh, thank goodness. Oh, Nate, that's wonderful. That's everything. I need to tell Emma. Can you meet us at home? I'm leaving the office right now. Nate left work early, his boss waving him off with congratulations and understanding. He picked Emma up from school, and she knew immediately that something had changed. Daddy, you're smiling, really smiling. Did something good happen? Something very good happened. Let's go home and talk about it. Claire was already there when they arrived, sitting on his front steps like she'd run the whole way. Emma ran to her, and Claire scooped her up, spinning her around. Guess what? Claire said, setting Emma down. You get to stay in Seattle. Emma's eyes went huge. Really? I don't have to move? Really, Nate confirmed, kneeling down to her level. The judge decided that you should stay here, in your school, with your friends, with me. You're not going anywhere. Emma threw herself at him so hard she nearly knocked him over. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you for fighting for me. You never have to thank me for that, sweetheart. You're worth fighting for, always. What about Mommy? Is she sad? Nate chose his words carefully. Mommy loves you very much, and she's probably sad that she can't take you to Denver with her. But that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. It just means that sometimes adults have to make hard choices, and this time the choice was that you needed to stay here. Can I still visit her, even if she moves? Of course. We'll work out a schedule, maybe some weekends, part of the summer. You'll still have your mom in your life, just differently than before. Emma nodded slowly, processing. Then she looked up at Claire. Are you staying too, or are you going to leave like Mommy? Claire crouched down beside Nate, taking Emma's small hands in hers. I'm staying. I'm not going anywhere. If it's okay with you and your dad, I'd like to be part of your lives for a very long time. Like a family? If you want that. Yes. Like a family. Emma looked between them, her expression serious. I think I want that. But can we still have our special pancake mornings, Daddy? Just you and me? Absolutely, Nate said, his throat tight. Some things will stay exactly the same, like pancake mornings and library trips and bedtime stories. Those are ours. Okay then, Claire can stay. They ordered pizza to celebrate, and Emma talked non-stop about how relieved she was, how she'd been scared to say goodbye to her friends, how she wanted to tell Mrs. Patterson that she got to stay in her class. She fell asleep early, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the past few weeks. When she was safely tucked in bed, Nate and Claire sat on the couch, finally allowing themselves to feel the full weight of what had happened. I can't believe we won, Nate said. I was so sure the court would side with Sarah, that money and opportunities would matter more than anything else. But they didn't. Love mattered, presence mattered, you mattered. Claire leaned her head on his shoulder. Emma gets to keep her father, and you get to keep your daughter. That's everything. It is, and I get you too. Somehow, in the middle of the hardest fight of my life, I found you. We found each other, Claire corrected. Two people who thought they were too old, too broken, too late. Who decided to try anyway. Nate turned to face her, taking both her hands. I meant what I said the other night. I love you. And I know we're moving fast, and I know we still have things to figure out, but I want to figure them out with you. I want to build a life that includes you, if you want that too. I want that more than I've wanted anything in years. Claire's eyes were shining. But I need you to know something. I can't give you more children. If that's something you want in the future, stop, Nate said gently. I have Emma. I don't need more children. I need someone who loves her and sees her and wants to be part of her life. Someone who makes me feel like I'm exactly enough just as I am. That's you, Claire. You're exactly what we need. You're exactly what I need too. You and Emma and this beautiful, messy, imperfect life you're building. I don't want perfect anymore. I just want real. They sat together in the quiet of Nate's apartment. Two people who'd survived heartbreak and loneliness and all the ways the world tried to convince them they weren't enough. They'd found each other in a coffee shop on Christmas night, and in less than 2 weeks, they'd built something that felt like forever. The next morning was Saturday, which meant pancakes. Emma woke early and padded into the kitchen to find both Nate and Claire already there. I thought pancakes were just for Daddy and me, Emma said, but she was smiling. They are, Nate confirmed. But I thought maybe Claire could make us eggs to go with them, if that's okay? Emma considered this seriously. Okay, but the pancakes have to be stars. That's the rule. Stars it is, Nate said, pulling out the special cookie cutters they used. They made breakfast together, the three of them moving around the small kitchen with surprising coordination. Emma told them about her plans for her space project presentation, now that she could actually give it. Claire listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made Emma light up with the joy of sharing something she loved. After breakfast, while Emma was getting dressed, Nate's phone rang. Sarah. Nate, we need to talk about the ruling. Okay. I'm not moving to Denver. Brian and I talked, and we decided that being near Emma is more important than the job opportunity. He's going to look for something here in Seattle. Nate felt something in his chest ease, relief mixed with gratitude. That's good, Sarah, really good. Emma needs both of us. I know, and I'm sorry it took a court ruling for me to see that. I got caught up in the idea of this perfect new life, and I forgot to think about what Emma actually needed. Sarah's voice was thick with emotion. Thank you for fighting for her, for not letting me make a terrible mistake. She's worth fighting for. We both know that. She is. And Nate, I hear you're seeing someone. The woman who was at the courthouse with you? Claire. Yes. It's serious. Emma likes her? Emma loves her, and so do I. Sarah was quiet for a moment. I'm happy for you, really. You deserve someone who sees what I couldn't, that you're more than enough exactly as you are. After they hung up, Nate stood in his kitchen feeling like something had finally shifted into place. Sarah wasn't moving. Emma got to keep both parents. He had Claire. The impossible weight he'd been carrying for weeks was finally lifting. Claire found him there, standing by the window with a dazed expression. Everything okay? Sarah's not moving to Denver. She and Brian are staying in Seattle. Nate, that's wonderful. Emma gets both of you. She does. And I get you. Somehow, everything worked out. Claire crossed to him and wrapped her arms around his waist. Not somehow. You fought for what mattered. You didn't give up. You let people help you. That's why everything worked out. They stood there holding each other while Emma sang in her bedroom about Jupiter and its 79 moons. Through the window, Seattle stretched out under a rare sunny January sky, full of possibilities and second chances. That afternoon, they took Emma to the park. She ran ahead to the playground while Nate and Claire walked slowly behind, hand in hand. What happens now? Claire asked. Now that the crisis is over and we have time to actually date like normal people? I don't think we were ever going to be normal people, Nate said with a smile. But I'd like to keep doing this. Family dinners and space projects and just being together, building something. I'd like that too. Claire paused. My lease is up in 3 months. I've been thinking about moving somewhere with more space, maybe closer to here? Claire Addison, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I'm suggesting that I want to be part of your daily life, not just your evening life. That I want Emma to see me as someone permanent, not just someone who visits. That I want to build a home with you, if you want that too. Nate stopped walking and turned to face her fully. I want that. More than I can say. But are you sure? It's a big step. I'm sure. For the first time in 8 years, I'm absolutely sure. Claire looked at Emma playing on the swings, her laughter carrying across the park. I spent so long believing I was too old for this, too broken for a family, too late for love. But I was wrong. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. With a single dad and his space-obsessed daughter? With the man who bought me a flower when I needed to feel valued? With the girl who taught me that family isn't about biology, it's about showing up and caring and choosing each other every day, with both of you. Emma ran back to them, breathless and excited. Claire, Daddy, come push me on the swings. I want to see if I can touch the sky. They ran after her, all three of them, and for a moment Nate felt like he was flying too. Like all the years of being told he wasn't enough, all the nights of loneliness, all the fears that he'd missed his chance at happiness. All of it had led him exactly here, to this park, with this woman and this child who made his life complete. As they pushed Emma higher and higher, her delighted shrieks filling the air, Nate caught Claire's eye and saw his own joy reflected back at him. They'd both been so certain they were too old, too broken, too late. They'd both survived marriages that ended because they weren't what someone else needed them to be. But here, now, they were exactly right. Not despite their ages or their pasts or their scars, but because of them. Because they'd learned what mattered. Because they knew how to fight for the people they loved. Because they understood that showing up every day, being present and kind and willing to try, was worth more than any perfect fairy tale. That evening, after they'd worn Emma out at the park, and come home for dinner, after Emma had fallen asleep with her head on Claire's lap while they watched a documentary about the Hubble telescope, Nate carried his daughter to bed. Claire followed, and they stood together in Emma's doorway, watching her sleep. Thank you, Nate whispered, for choosing us, for staying, for fighting beside me. Thank you for letting me, Claire whispered back, for seeing me as more than my age or my past, for making me feel like I'm exactly enough. You are exactly enough. You always were. They stood there a moment longer, then retreated to the living room. Claire needed to go home. She had an early meeting tomorrow, but neither of them moved toward the door. I don't want to leave, Claire admitted. These past 2 weeks, being here with you and Emma, it's felt more like home than anywhere I've lived in 8 years. Then don't leave. Stay. Not forever, not yet, but tonight. Stay tonight. So she did. She stayed and they talked until late about plans for the future, about Emma's next science project, about where they might look for a place with more space. They talked about meeting each other's friends and families, about building traditions and making memories. They talked about all the normal, mundane, beautiful things that people who love each other talk about. And when they finally went to bed, Claire and Nate's room, both of them wrapped around each other like they were afraid to let go, They fell asleep with smiles on their faces and hope in their hearts. The white rose from that first Christmas night was long gone, its petals dried and saved in a small box on Claire's nightstand. But what it represented, the moment when a stranger had looked at her and seen someone worth valuing, the moment when she'd decided to hope again, that lived on in every choice they made to show up for each other. Two people who'd been told they were too old had proved everyone wrong. They weren't too old for love, too broken for family, too late for happiness. They were exactly the right age, with exactly the right experiences, at exactly the right time. And as winter turned slowly toward spring, as Emma prepared to present her solar system project, and Sarah settled into co-parenting from across town, and Claire started looking at houses with bigger kitchens and rooms for Emma's endless books, they built something beautiful from the pieces they'd been given. Not a perfect life, not a fairy tale ending, just a real, messy, wonderful family made up of people who'd chosen each other, who kept choosing each other, every single day. And that, Nate thought as he watched Claire help Emma with her homework one evening in March, her reading glasses perched on her nose and her patience infinite, was more than enough. It was everything.